Eleanor Brooks never imagined her new life would begin with a broken arm and a dead fiancé. The stagecoach that carried her across 2,000 miles of American wilderness delivered her to a town where no one knew her name, and the man who had promised to marry her was 6 feet under a cold Montana ground. Pain shot through her shattered arm with every breath. Her money was nearly gone. She had no family, no friends, and no way home. But when a quiet cowboy with calloused hands knelt beside her and promised gentleness, everything changed. Stay with me until the end of the story. Hit that like button and comment what city you are watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and Eleanor felt the jolt travel straight through her broken arm like a lightning strike. She bit down hard on her lower lip, tasting copper, refusing to cry out. She had already cried enough during the 3-day journey from Fort Benton. Silent tears that streaked through the dust on her cheeks, while the other passengers pretended not to notice. "Sweetwater Station," the driver called, his voice rough as gravel. "End of the line, folks." Through the grimy window, Eleanor caught her first glimpse of the town that was supposed to become her home. Sweetwater, Montana territory looked nothing like the letters had described. James Thornton, her intended, her future, her carefully constructed escape from Boston, had written about a bustling frontier town with 2 churches, a proper mercantile, and a thriving community of respectable families. What she saw was a collection of weathered wooden buildings slouching against each other like tired soldiers, a single muddy street, and more horses than people. The April wind carried the scent of livestock, wood smoke, and something wild and untamed that made her stomach clench with fear. "Ma'am." The driver appeared at the coach door, his weathered face creasing with concern. "You need help down." Eleanor tried to gather herself, tried to become the composed young woman she had been raised to be. But when she attempted to stand, another wave of pain crashed through her arm and the world tilted sideways. The break had happened 2 days ago when the stagecoach hit a deep rut outside Helena. She had been thrown against the side of the coach, her left arm taking the full impact. The bone had not pierced the skin, but she could feel where it had snapped, feel the unnatural bend just above her wrist. "Easy now." The driver's hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her down. Her legs trembled when her feet touched solid ground. "I am looking for James Thornton," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He should be here. He was supposed to meet me." The driver's expression changed, a flicker of something that made Eleanor's already fragile composure crack a little more. "Thornton? James Thornton from the Circle T Ranch?" "Yes." Hope fluttered weakly in her chest. "Do you know where I might find him?" The driver removed his hat, and Eleanor's hope died. She knew that gesture. She had seen it at her father's funeral, at her mother's, at her brother's. It was the universal language of bad news. "Ma'am, I am real sorry to tell you this, but James Thornton passed on about 2 weeks back. Pneumonia took him quick. He is buried up at the cemetery on the hill." The words reached Eleanor through a strange, muffled distance, as though she were underwater. 2 weeks. He had been dead for 2 weeks, and she had kept traveling toward him, kept imagining their first meeting, kept constructing a future that was already gone. She had left Boston with nothing but a trunk of clothes, $40 in savings, and a marriage contract signed by a man who no longer existed. "I see." Her voice sounded perfectly calm, perfectly reasonable. "Thank you for informing me. Ma'am, do you have folks here? Anyone expecting you besides—" "No," the word came out sharper than she intended. "No one." Eleanor stood on the wooden sidewalk, cradling her broken arm against her chest, watching the driver unload her trunk. Inside that trunk were 3 dresses, 2 nightgowns, a wool coat, her mother's Bible, her grandmother's cameo brooch, and the carefully preserved letters from James Thornton. Letters full of promises about new beginnings and fresh starts. All lies now. Not intentional ones, perhaps, but lies nonetheless. "Where is the nearest hotel?" she asked. "There is Mrs. Patterson's boarding house down the street. She keeps clean rooms, charges fair rates." Eleanor nodded, calculating quickly. $40 minus what she still owed for the stagecoach fare. Maybe 30 left. How long could she survive on $30 in a town where she knew no one and had no prospects? The driver insisted on carrying her trunk to Patterson's boarding house. A middle-aged woman with suspicious eyes and a tight mouth answered the door. $2 a week, 3 meals a day included, but you eat what I cook when I cook it. No gentleman callers, no drinking, no noise after 9. $2 a week. If she took the room, she would have enough money for maybe 3 weeks, perhaps 4 if she was very lucky. And then what? That is acceptable, she heard herself say. She could not sleep in the street. She could not go back to Boston. There was nothing to go back to. The humiliation of returning as a failed mail-order bride with a broken arm and empty pockets was unthinkable. Later that evening, Eleanor sat carefully on the edge of the narrow bed in her rented room and allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She was 24 years old, unmarried, injured, and alone in a frontier town where she knew absolutely no one. Her father's shipping business had collapsed after his death, leaving nothing but debts. Her mother had died 2 years before that, and her brother Thomas had been killed at Gettysburg. She had no siblings, no close relatives, no one to turn to. A knock on the door startled her from her dark thoughts. "Ma'am," it was the stagecoach driver again. "I took the liberty of asking Doc Morrison to come see you. He is downstairs." Eleanor wanted to refuse. She could not afford a doctor. But when she tried to stand, the room swam around her. Without proper treatment, she might lose the use of her arm entirely. Doc Morrison turned out to be a lean man in his 50s, with kind eyes and steady hands. He examined her arm with gentle efficiency while she sat in Mrs. Patterson's parlor. "It is a bad break," he said finally. "Needs to be set properly, and it should have been done 2 days ago. I can do it, but I will not lie to you, Miss Brooks. It is going to hurt like hell. Pardon my language. How much will it cost? Normally, I would charge $5 for something like this. But I heard about your situation from Jack here." He nodded toward the driver. "I am willing to work out an arrangement." Charity. She'd come to this. "Very well, but let us deal with payment after we deal with the arm. I will need help holding you steady. Mrs. Patterson, I will get Caleb." The landlady disappeared out the front door. Through the window, Eleanor could see the unfamiliar street, the unfamiliar buildings, the unfamiliar mountains rising in the distance. Everything was wrong. Footsteps on the porch. Then Mrs. Patterson returned with a man Eleanor had not seen before. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and work-roughened hands. He wore dusty ranch clothes and a hat he removed as soon as he stepped inside. His face was weathered but not unkind, with deep-set gray eyes that met hers with something like understanding. "This is Caleb Wright," Mrs. Patterson said. "He has got the steadiest hands in the county." "Ma'am." Caleb's voice was quiet with a slight drawl. "Doc Morrison says you need some help. I am here if you want it." Eleanor looked at this stranger and felt something crack in her chest. "I do not even know you." "No, ma'am, but you need help, and I have got hands that work. Sometimes that is enough." Doc Morrison was already preparing his instruments. "Caleb is going to hold you steady while I set the bone. It is going to hurt, but it will be over quickly." "I need—" Eleanor's voice broke. She swallowed hard. "I need a moment." "Take your time," Caleb said. He pulled a chair over and sat down. "I broke my leg when I was 15. Horse threw me. The anticipation is always worse than the reality." "Is it? Usually." He met her eyes, and there was no pity there. Just honest acknowledgement. "Will not lie to you, though. It is going to hurt fierce for a minute. But then it will be done, and you will be on the mend." Eleanor nodded. "All right, I am ready." Caleb moved behind her, his hands gentle but firm on her shoulders. Doc Morrison knelt in front of her, with her broken arm cradled in his hands. "On 3, the doctor said. 1. He pulled, and Eleanor screamed. The pain was white-hot, absolute, obliterating everything else. She felt the bones shift, felt something grind and pop. Then Caleb's voice was in her ear, steady and calm. "You are all right. It is done. You are all right." She was sobbing, her body shaking with the aftermath of pain. But the worst was over. Doc Morrison was already wrapping her arm in clean bandages, splinting it with 2 thin pieces of wood. "That is the worst of it," the doctor said. "Keep it still for the next 6 weeks. Come see me in a week, and I will check how it is healing." Eleanor could not speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face, while Caleb kept his hands on her shoulders, an anchor in the storm. "Miss Brooks," Doc Morrison's voice was gentle. "You did well." Most folks pass out when I set a break like that. After the doctor left, Eleanor sat very still. Caleb was standing quietly by the window. "Thank you," Eleanor said. "I am sorry you had to see me scream. You had a bone set without morphine. You earned that scream." Caleb turned from the window. "Jack told me about your situation, about Thornton." "I see." Eleanor looked down at her bandaged arm. "I suppose the whole town knows by now. It is a small town. Word travels fast." He paused. "Thornton was a good man. If he had lived long enough to meet you, I think he would have done right by you. But he did not live, and now I am here with no husband, no home, and $34 to my name. Miss Brooks, I do not know your whole story, and you do not owe me any explanations. But I know you are in a difficult spot, and I might be able to help." Eleanor's laugh was hollow. "Unless you are offering marriage, I do not see how." "I am not offering marriage," his voice was steady. "But I am offering honest work. I run a ranch about 5 miles east of here. I need someone to help with housework, cooking, maybe some bookkeeping if you are able. Room and board included, plus wages. $2 a week to start. You would have your own room, and I promise you would be treated with respect." "Why?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "You do not know me because you traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger because you needed a fresh start, because you paid the doctor even though you can barely afford it, because you did not pass out when he set your arm. That tells me you are brave, honest, and proud. Those are good qualities. Or it tells you I am desperate and stubborn. Maybe that too." A slight smile touched his lips. "But desperate and stubborn gets things done on a ranch. I need the help." "That is the truth." Eleanor wanted to refuse, but she had $34 left. In a month, maybe less, she would have nothing. "I do not know anything about ranching," she said carefully. "You do not need to. You just need to know how to keep a house and cook decent meals." "Can you do that?" "Yes, then you are qualified." Caleb stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Think about it. You do not need to decide right now. I will be in town through tomorrow morning. If you want the job, come find me before I head back to the ranch. If you do not, no hard feelings." He turned to leave, and Eleanor heard herself say, "Mr. Wright?" He paused. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone helped me once when I needed it, and because I believe people deserve a fair chance, especially when life has dealt them a bad hand. You did not ask to arrive here with a broken arm and no future. But here you are, and you are still standing. That is worth something." By morning, Eleanor had made her decision. She found Caleb at the livery stable, preparing his horse for the ride back to the ranch. "Mr. Wright, Miss Brooks," he continued, checking his saddle. "How is the arm?" "Painful but bearable." She took a deep breath. "I have decided to accept your offer if it is still available." "It is. When can you be ready to leave?" "I have very little to pack." "An hour." "That will work." An hour later, her trunk was loaded onto Caleb's wagon, and Eleanor was seated beside him as they left Sweetwater behind. She did not look back. The ride to the ranch took just over an hour. Caleb did not talk much, and Eleanor was grateful for the silence. The landscape rolled past, hills still brown from winter, patches of snow lingering in shadows, mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. "There it is," Caleb said, pointing ahead. The ranch. Eleanor saw a cluster of buildings nestled in a small valley. The main house was modest but solid, built from logs with a stone chimney. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and a few smaller outbuildings. "It is not much," Caleb said, "but it is home." "It looks fine," Eleanor said, and meant it. As they drew closer, two men emerged from the barn. They were younger than Caleb, both lean and weather-beaten. "That is Tom and Ezra," Caleb said. "They are good men. They know you are coming, and they know you are to be treated with respect." Tom and Ezra approached, hats in hands. "Ma'am," they said in near unison. "This is Miss Brooks," Caleb said. "She will be helping with the house and cooking. Show her the same courtesy you would show any lady." "Yes, sir," Tom said. He was the younger of the two, barely 20. "Welcome to the Circle W, Miss Brooks." Caleb led her inside. The house was simple but clean, one main room that served as kitchen and living area with two doors leading to bedrooms. The furniture was handmade but sturdy. Your room is through here, Caleb said, opening one of the doors. It is not fancy, but it is private. The room was small but adequate. A bed, a dresser, a chair, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It is perfect, Eleanor said. Thank you. I want to make something clear. Caleb hesitated at the door. This is honest work for honest pay. You are not indentured, and you are not obligated beyond the work we agreed on. If at any time you want to leave, you can. I will pay you for whatever time you have worked and drive you back to town myself. No questions, no hard feelings. Agreed? Agreed. After he left, Eleanor sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the journey. She had left Boston as a mail-order bride and arrived to find herself alone and broken in a land she did not understand. But she was not alone anymore. She had work, she had shelter, and she had one person who had shown her kindness without asking for anything in return. Eleanor woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and the low murmur of men's voices outside. Her broken arm throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, but she had promised honest work, and Eleanor Brooks kept her promises. She dressed awkwardly with one hand and emerged to find the main room empty. A fire already crackled in the stove, and coffee sat warming in a pot. Through the window, she could see Caleb and his two hands working in the corral. They moved with easy efficiency. Eleanor poured herself coffee and surveyed the kitchen. It was functional but chaotic. Dishes stacked haphazardly, supplies scattered, a layer of grime suggesting months of bachelor neglect. She was still standing there when Caleb stepped inside. "Morning," he said quietly. "How did you sleep?" "Well enough. Thank you for the coffee. Listen, about the work. I do not expect you to do everything immediately. Take your time getting settled. The arm needs to heal." "I can work," Eleanor said sharply. "I am paying you to help, not to injure yourself further." Caleb's tone was mild but firm. Doc Morrison said 6 weeks of rest. I will not have you undoing his work because you are too stubborn to take care of yourself. Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. "Mr. Wright, I appreciate your concern, but I am quite capable of determining my own limitations." "Are you?" He looked at her directly. "Because from where I am standing, you look like a strong wind could knock you over. When is the last time you ate a proper meal?" Eleanor gripped the table edge, trying to steady herself. "What would you have me do? Sit idle while you pay me wages I have not earned? I would have you do light work until the arm heals. Cooking if you are able. Some organizing. Bookkeeping maybe, if you know numbers. Things that do not require heavy lifting or two working hands." Caleb picked up his coffee. "And I would have you eat 3 solid meals a day and get proper rest. That is part of the job, too. Staying healthy enough for to work." It was reasonable. It was generous. But Eleanor's pride bristled. Before she could respond, the door opened, and Tom and Ezra filed in. "Morning, Miss Brooks," Tom said cheerfully. "Something sure smells good." "Oh." His face fell when he realized the only smell was coffee. "I can make breakfast," Eleanor said quickly. "Just show me where everything is." What followed was a comedy of errors. The flour was in an unmarked tin. The bacon was hanging in the cold cellar. The cast iron skillet was so heavy she could barely lift it with one hand. And when she tried, pain shot through her arm. Caleb caught the pan before it hit the floor. "That is enough. Tom, go get the bacon. Ezra, get the flour. Miss Brooks, sit down." Eleanor sat, humiliation burning in her throat. But Caleb did not look angry. He just rolled up his sleeves and started laying bacon in the pan. "The bacon should be on medium heat," Eleanor said quietly. "Not too hot, or it will burn before it cooks through. Like this?" Caleb adjusted the stove. "Yes. And for the biscuits, you want the dough just barely coming together. Do not overmix it, or they will be tough." "So Miss Brooks," Tom said, flipping bacon, "you from back east? Your accent sounds educated." "Boston. Long way from Boston to Montana. What brings you out here?" "Tom," Caleb's voice carried a warning, "mind your own business." But Eleanor surprised herself by answering, "I needed a fresh start. Boston held nothing for me anymore." Mr. Thornton's letters made Montana sound like a place where someone could build a new life. "Well, you can definitely do that here," Tom said. "It is hard country, but it is honest. You work, you earn, you keep your word, people respect you." The biscuits came out better than expected. The four of them ate together at the rough wooden table, and Eleanor noticed that Caleb made sure she got the largest portions without making a show of it. "We are riding out to check the north fence," Caleb said. "Should be back by mid-afternoon. Miss Brooks, please do not try to lift anything heavy or do anything that will strain that arm. If you want to organize the kitchen, that is fine. There is paper and pen in the desk if you want to make a list of supplies we might need." He paused. "And if you need anything, anything at all, you fire 3 shots from the rifle on the wall. We will hear it and come running." After the men left, the house fell into silence. Eleanor began to explore her new domain. The kitchen was worse than she had thought. Supplies mixed together with no system, coffee next to lamp oil, sugar next to saddle soap. But Eleanor had learned something important after her father's death. Work was salvation. When grief and fear threatened to overwhelm her, there was always something practical to be done. She started with what she could manage one-handed: sorting supplies, wiping down shelves, making lists. By midday, she had identified a dozen things they needed urgently. She was attempting to wash dishes one-handed when she heard hoofbeats outside. Too early for Caleb to return. Through the window, she saw a horse carrying a woman in a dark blue riding dress. The woman dismounted and knocked firmly. Eleanor opened the door. "You must be Miss Brooks." The woman was perhaps 40 with sharp, intelligent eyes. "I am Sarah Mitchell. I own the ranch that borders Caleb's property to the east. Heard you arrived yesterday and thought I would come by to welcome you properly." "That is very kind." Eleanor stepped back. "Please come in." Sarah entered, her gaze sweeping the room. "I see you have been busy." Place needed it. "How is the arm?" "Painful but healing. Doc Morrison said it with Mr. Wright's help." "That is Caleb for you. Steadiest hands I have ever seen." Sarah's expression softened. "How are you settling in?" "Everything is strange, but Mr. Wright has been very kind. He is a good man." Sarah said it firmly. "Came here with nothing 8 years ago. Worked harder than any 3 men. Built this place from dirt. You are safe here if you were wondering." "Thank you for saying so. I am not just saying it. I mean it." Sarah's eyes were serious. "But I also want you to know that if you ever need anything, or if anything does not feel right, my place is just 5 miles east. Do not hesitate. Frontier life is hard for women, and it is harder when you are alone and new. You do not have to be alone, understand?" Something in Eleanor's chest loosened. "I understand. Thank you." Sarah stayed for an hour, helping Eleanor finish the dishes while sharing information about the area. Which merchants in town were honest? Which families were welcoming to newcomers? "There is a church social next month," Sarah said. "You should come. People will want to meet you. I am not sure I am ready for—" "You do not have to be ready. Just show up. That is half the battle out here." After Sarah left, Eleanor felt both better and more overwhelmed. Better because she now had one potential ally. Overwhelmed because she had been reminded how exposed she was here. The men returned in mid-afternoon, cold and tired and hungry. Eleanor had managed to prepare a simple stew using ingredients from the cellar. Nothing fancy, but hot and filling. "This is good," Caleb said, sounding surprised. "Really good." "Better than Tom's cooking anyway," Ezra added. The banter continued through the meal, and Eleanor found herself relaxing. These men were rough around the edges, but there was a fundamental decency to them. After dinner, Eleanor attempted to clean the main room, but exhaustion was catching up, and the pain in her arm made it hard to think. She was trying to sweep one-handed when Caleb came back inside and quietly took the broom. "That is enough for today. You have done plenty." He finished sweeping. "You need rest more than I need clean floors." "Miss Brooks, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you pushing yourself so hard?" "I am not going to throw you out if you take a day to recover." Eleanor looked at him. "Mr. Wright, I have $34 to my name. My family is gone. My home is gone. Everything I planned is gone. This job is all I have. If I cannot do it properly, if you decide I am not worth keeping, then I have nothing. So yes, I am pushing myself because the alternative is giving up, and I cannot afford to give up. Not yet." Caleb was quiet. "All right, I understand, but you are thinking about this wrong. This is not about whether you are worth keeping. You have already proven your value today just by trying. This is about getting you healed enough to do the job properly, and that means rest." I am not scared. Yes, you are, and that is natural given what you have been through. Caleb moved toward the door. My mother used to say that courage is not about not being scared. It is about being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. You have got that kind of courage, Miss Brooks, but you also need to be smart about it. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will figure out a routine that works with the arm. The next few weeks established a pattern. Eleanor would wake early, help with breakfast as much as her arm allowed, and spend the day organizing the house while the men worked outside. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, early mornings and long days, the constant demands of animals and land. She learned the men's preferences. Tom liked his coffee with sugar. Ezra hated onions. Caleb would eat anything but always gave her the best portions. On the fourth week, Caleb asked if she knew bookkeeping. Martha used to keep the ranch accounts, he explained. But since she left, I have been doing it myself, and I am making a mess of it. If you know numbers, it would be a real help. Eleanor knew numbers. Her father had taught her accounting when she had shown an aptitude for it. She spent that afternoon going through Caleb's ledgers, finding errors and omissions, creating a system that made sense. This is good, Caleb said that evening. Really good. You have caught mistakes I did not even know I had made. Where did you learn this? My father. He ran a shipping business in Boston. He taught me accounting when I was 15. Well, he taught you well. This is worth more than cooking and cleaning, Miss Brooks. No, the word came out sharp. We agreed on $2 a week. That is fair. Eleanor met his eyes. I do not want your charity, Mr. Wright. I want honest work for honest pay. If you start adjusting wages every time I do something useful, it becomes charity, not employment. Do you understand? I understand, but I want you to know I appreciate this. You are making a real difference here. That night, Eleanor allowed herself to feel a small measure of pride. She was making a difference. She was earning her keep. She was surviving. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in early May. A writer from town delivered it, seeming surprised to find a woman answering the door at Caleb Wright's ranch. Eleanor signed for it with hands that started trembling the moment she saw the law office return address. Thornton and Associates, attorneys at law, Sweetwater, Montana Territory. She stood on the porch holding the envelope. Inside, she could hear Tom and Ezra arguing. Caleb was in the barn checking on a mare due to foal. Eleanor's fingers shook as she opened the envelope. The words swam before her eyes, and she had to read them 3 times before they made sense. Dear Miss Brooks, we represent the estate of the late James Thornton. It has come to our attention that you traveled to Sweetwater with the intention of entering into marriage with Mr. Thornton, and that his untimely death prevented the completion of this arrangement. We write to inform you that Mr. Thornton's will, executed 2 months before his death, makes specific provision for this circumstance. In the event that he should die before marriage could take place, he directed that his property, including the Circle T Ranch and all associated assets, be offered first to his intended bride, should she still desire to make her home in Montana Territory. The Circle T consists of approximately 300 acres of grazing land, a main house, barn, and associated outbuildings, plus livestock currently valued at approximately $800. The property is unencumbered by debt. If you wish to claim this inheritance, please contact our office at your earliest convenience to complete the necessary legal documents. If you decline, the property will be sold and proceeds distributed to Mr. Thornton's distant relations in Kansas. Respectfully, Harold Thornton, attorney at law. Eleanor read the letter a 4th time, then a 5th. Then, 300 acres, a house, livestock, an entire ranch left to her by a man she had never met. It was impossible. Miss Brooks, Caleb's voice made her jump. He had emerged from the barn. You all right? You look like you have seen a ghost. Eleanor's voice failed. She thrust the letter at him wordlessly. Caleb read it slowly, his face carefully neutral. When he finished, he folded the paper and handed it back. Well, he said quietly, that is unexpected. I do not understand. Eleanor found her voice again. Why would he leave me anything? We never met. We were strangers. Maybe that is exactly why. Caleb leaned against the porch railing. James was a good man, but he was alone. No wife, no children, no close family. Maybe he figured if you had been brave enough to come all this way, you deserved a chance at making a life here, even if he could not be part of it. But a whole ranch, the Circle T, is a good property. Not as big as some, but well-maintained. Good water. Decent grazing. Caleb's voice was carefully neutral. You would have real options with a place like that. Could work it yourself, hire help, or sell it and live off the proceeds for years. Real options. The words echoed in Eleanor's mind. For the first time since leaving Boston, she would have actual choices. Not desperate scrambling, not dependence on charity, but real autonomy. I do not know anything about running a ranch, she said. You could learn, or you could hire a foreman to run it for you. Caleb's expression was unreadable. Or you could sell it and go back east. Start fresh somewhere familiar. Go back east, return to Boston with enough money to live respectably. It should have been tempting, but when Eleanor tried to imagine boarding a train back to Massachusetts, all she felt was hollow dread. Boston meant returning to a place where everyone knew about her family's failure. I need to think, she said finally. I cannot decide this right now. Of course. Take all the time you need. Caleb straightened. For what it is worth, I hope you will consider staying. Montana suits you better than you might think. He left before she could respond. Eleanor watched him go and felt the careful stability of the past 6 weeks crumbling beneath her feet. That evening, she burned dinner. It was the first meal she had truly ruined since her arm healed, and she stared at the blackened potatoes with frustration. It is fine, Tom said, sawing at a tough piece of meat. Adds character. It is inedible. I am sorry. I will make something else. Sit down, Caleb said gently but firmly. We can eat bread and cheese. It is fine. It is not fine. I have wasted good food. Miss Brooks. Caleb waited until she looked at him. It is one meal. You are allowed to have a bad day. But it was not just about the meal, and they both knew it. Finally, Ezra cleared his throat. Miss Brooks, if there is anything we can do to help, you just say the word. The simple kindness nearly broke her. These men who had started as strangers had become something like friends. Leaving them would hurt more than she had expected. Thank you, she managed. I appreciate that. Eleanor spent the night lying in darkness, trying to imagine her future. Option 1, accept the inheritance. Keep the Circle T. Try to run it herself. It would mean learning everything from scratch. She would need to hire help. She would be alone on that ranch, isolated, responsible for everything. Option 2, accept the inheritance but hire a foreman to manage it. She could live in town, collect profits, maintain ownership without the daily burden. It was safer but felt like a half measure. Option 3, sell the property, take the money, and leave Montana entirely. She would have enough to live modestly for years, but leaving felt like failure. Option 4, stay here at Caleb's ranch, forget the inheritance, just continue the life she had started building. That felt safest, but also most cowardly. She would have no independence. She would be an employee, dependent on Caleb's goodwill. The thoughts circled endlessly. By morning, Eleanor had not slept. She forced herself through the routine. Coffee, breakfast, cleaning, but her mind was elsewhere. At mid-morning, Sarah Mitchell arrived unannounced, riding up with the confidence of someone who had been visiting this ranch for years. Eleanor, she called, using the familiar name for the first time. Got a minute? They sat on the porch with coffee. Heard about Thornton's will, Sarah said. News travels fast. So what are you going to do? I do not know. Eleanor stared at her cup. I do not know anything about ranching. I would probably run the place into the ground within a year. You might, or you might not. Sarah set her cup down. Eleanor, can I tell you something? When my John died 3 years back, everyone assumed I would sell the ranch. Woman alone, no sons, past 40. Conventional wisdom said I could not manage. But I had been working that land alongside John for 20 years. I knew every inch of it, so I hired 2 good hands and kept going. It has been hard, and sometimes I lie awake at night worrying. But it is mine. I answer to no one, depend on no one. That is worth all the worry. But you knew what you were doing, Eleanor protested. You had experience. I have been here 6 weeks. So learn. Sarah's voice was matter of fact. Hire someone who knows ranching to teach you, or hire a foreman to run it while you learn, or partner with someone. Plenty of small ranchers around here who would benefit from combining operations. She leaned forward. The point is, you have options now. Real ones. Do not throw that away because you are scared. I am not scared. Yes, you are, and that is fine. Smart people are scared of big decisions, but do not let fear make your decisions for you. That is how you end up with regrets. After Sarah left, Arsharem, Eleanor walked out past the barn to a small rise where she could see the mountains in the distance. The land stretched out before her, vast and open and indifferent. She thought about James Thornton, a man she had never met who had nevertheless given her this extraordinary gift. What had he seen in her letters? She thought about her father, about the lessons he had taught her about numbers and responsibility. She thought about her mother, who died still mourning her lost social position. She thought about Thomas, her brother, who marched off to war and came home in a coffin. All of them were gone. Their dreams, their plans, their futures, all dust. What remained was this moment, this choice, this one chance to build something that would be entirely hers. Eleanor stood on that hill for a long time, and slowly, gradually, a decision crystallized. She found Caleb in the barn, mucking out stalls. He looked up when she entered. I am going to keep it, Eleanor said without preamble. The Circle T, I am going to accept the inheritance and try to make it work. Caleb set down his pitchfork. That is good. I am glad. I will need help. I do not know what I am doing, and I will make mistakes, probably a lot of them. But I have to trim money. I cannot spend the rest of my life being careful and dependent, always one disaster away from destitution. James gave me a chance at something real, and I would be a coward to refuse it just because it is hard. You are not a coward. Caleb's voice was soft. You are one of the bravest people I have met. I do not feel brave. I feel terrified. That is what courage is, being terrified and doing it anyway. He smiled slightly. Someone smart once told me that. Eleanor managed a shaky laugh. I will need to hire help, a foreman maybe, or at least some hands who know what they are doing, and I will need supplies, and probably repairs. I have not even seen the property yet. I do not know what condition it is in after sitting empty for 6 weeks. I will help you. The words came quickly. If you want. I know the Circle T helped James with Roundup a few times. I can assess what needs doing, help you hire good people, teach you what you need to know. Why? Eleanor searched his face. Why would you do that? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Because you will need help, and I am able to give it. And because I would like to see you succeed. This territory needs people like you, people willing to work hard and build something lasting. It was not the whole answer. Eleanor could sense that. There was something else beneath the practical words, but she was too overwhelmed to push. Thank you. I do not know how I will repay you. No repayment needed. We help each other out here. That is how it works. Caleb picked up his pitchfork again. When do you want to see the property? As soon as possible. Tomorrow. Tomorrow works. We will ride over in the morning. See what we are dealing with. He paused. Eleanor, you are making the right choice. It will not be easy, but it will be yours. That is worth something. That night at dinner, Eleanor announced her decision to Tom and Ezra. It is good land, Ezra said finally. Thornton took care of it. You will have a solid foundation to build on. He met her eyes. But it will be hard work, especially at first. You sure you are ready for that? No, Eleanor admitted, but I am going to try anyway. Fair enough, Ezra nodded slowly. If you need an extra hand while you are getting established, I might know some folks looking for work. Good, honest men who know their business. I would appreciate that. The conversation moved on to practical matters. What livestock the Circle T had, what the grazing was like, what repairs were likely needed. Eleanor listened carefully, trying to absorb information that still felt abstract and overwhelming. She was committing to a future she could not quite imagine. Later, as she prepared for bed, Eleanor caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked different than she had 6 weeks ago. Her skin was darker from working outdoors, her face less hollow, her eyes less haunted. She looked like someone who belonged here. The ride to the Circle T took less than an hour. Caleb rode beside her on his steady gelding, while she managed the gentle mare he had chosen for her. Just over this rise, Caleb said. Eleanor's heart began to hammer. Then she saw it. The Circle T sat in a shallow valley with a creek running through it. The main house was larger than Caleb's, built from squared logs with a wide porch and real glass windows. The barn was substantial, and she could see several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the near pasture, perhaps 30 head. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was hers. Well, Caleb said quietly, what do you think? Eleanor could not speak. She just stared at this property that James Thornton had built, that he had intended to share with her, that he had left to her, even in death. Miss Brooks, Caleb's voice was concerned. You all right? I do not deserve this, Eleanor whispered. Maybe not. Caleb dismounted and came to help her down. But you have it anyway. Question is, what are you going to do with it? They walked the property for hours. Caleb pointed out everything, the good grazing land, the reliable water source, the solid construction of buildings. He showed her where fences needed mending, where the barn roof had a weak spot. He was methodical and thorough, neither sugarcoating the work ahead nor making it seem impossible. Inside the house, Eleanor found evidence of James Thornton's life. Books on a shelf, a pipe on the mantel, dishes in the cupboard, a bed with a quilt someone had made years ago. It felt like trespassing. It is yours now, Caleb reminded her gently. Everything here. He wanted you to have it. But why? Eleanor turned to him. Why would he leave all this to a woman he never met? Caleb leaned against the doorframe. I knew James a little. He was a good man, but a lonely one. Lost his wife in childbirth years back. The baby too. Never remarried, never really recovered. When he put that advertisement in the paper, I think he was looking for someone to carry on what he had built. Someone to give it meaning beyond just his own survival. But he could have left it to family. His only family was a brother in Kansas. They had not spoken in 10 years. No, James wanted someone who would appreciate this place, who would work it and love it. Caleb's gray eyes were steady on hers. When he wrote those letters to you, when you wrote back, I think he saw something in you that convinced him you were the right person. Dying before you arrived did not change that. Eleanor sank onto a chair. What if I fail? What if I cannot do this? Then you fail and you try something else. Caleb crossed to the window. But I do not think you will fail. You are tougher than you think, Eleanor Brooks. The use of her first name startled her, but she did not correct him. I will need help, she said, real help. A foreman at least, and a couple of hands, someone who can teach me what I need to know. I can help you find good men. Tom and Ezra might know some folks looking for work. Caleb turned back to her. And I will help however I can. My place borders yours. We can share some resources, help each other out during busy seasons. That is how it works out here. Nobody makes it completely alone. I do not want to be a burden. You will not be. You will pull your weight, same as anyone else. His expression softened. You are not alone in this, Eleanor. Not unless you choose to be. They spent the rest of the morning making lists. What supplies she would need immediately. What repairs could not wait. What could be deferred until fall. First thing is securing the livestock, Caleb said. Those cattle have been essentially wild for 6 weeks. We need to round them up, check their condition. Then the fences. You cannot keep stock without good fences. Then the barn roof before summer storms hit. Then, stop. Eleanor held up a hand, feeling dizzy. It is too much. I cannot. There is too much. One thing at a time. Caleb's voice was calm. We will tackle them in order of urgency. You do not have to do everything today or even this month. Eleanor forced herself to breathe. All right, one thing at a time. What is first? First, we hire some help. Cannot do anything without hands. You will need at least 2 good men, maybe 3 to start. Then we deal with the immediate problems. Livestock, fences, roof. Everything else can wait. They rode back to Caleb's ranch in comfortable silence. Eleanor's mind was racing. She would need money for supplies and wages. The lawyer had said James left some cash. She would need to find out how much. She would need to move her belongings. She would need to learn 1,000 things. That evening, Eleanor sat with Caleb at his kitchen table while they worked through practical details. He helped her draft an advertisement for hands, write questions to ask potential employees, Calculate what she could afford to pay. $2 a week plus room and board is standard for ranch hands, Caleb said. 3 for a good foreman with experience. You will also need to budget for supplies, food, tools, materials for repairs. Figure maybe $10 a month for basics, more if something major breaks. Eleanor did the math. James had left her approximately $300 in cash. It sounded like a fortune until she started subtracting. Within 6 months, maybe less, she would need the ranch to start generating income, or she would run out of money. The cattle are worth maybe $800 if you sold them now, Caleb continued. But you will make more by keeping them, letting them breed, selling the calves next year. That is your long-term income. In the short term, you might consider taking in some horses to train, or selling eggs if you can get the chicken operation going again. How do you know all this? Eleanor asked. You make it sound so simple. It is just math, income and expenses, like any business. Your father taught you accounting, right? This is the same thing, just with cows instead of cargo. Caleb smiled slightly, and I know it because I had to learn it. When I came here 8 years ago, I did not know a damn thing about ranching. I had been working as a carpenter in Denver, barely making enough to survive. I saved every penny for 3 years, came out here and bought land nobody else wanted because it needed too much work. Eleanor leaned forward. What made you do it? Wanted something that was mine. Wanted to build something that mattered. He looked down at the ledger. I had spent too many years working for other men, making them rich while I stayed poor. Figured I would rather work twice as hard for myself than make someone else wealthy. So I bought land, built a house, learned ranching from anyone who would teach me. Made a lot of mistakes those first few years. Lost stock, wasted money, nearly went under twice. But I kept at it, and eventually it started working. Were you not scared? Terrified? Caleb met her eyes. Still am some days. There is always something that can go wrong. Drought, disease, bad prices, injury. But being scared does not mean not doing it. Just means being careful and paying attention. Eleanor thought about that. Is helping me a stupid risk? No. The answer came without hesitation. Helping a neighbor get established is just good sense. Your success makes my ranch more valuable too. More people settling here, more community, more stability. That benefits everyone. He paused. Besides, I would help you even if there was no practical benefit. Some things you do because they are right, not because they are profitable. The next morning, they rode into Sweetwater together. Eleanor needed to meet with the lawyer to sign the inheritance papers. Harold Thornton was a thin man with sharp eyes and impeccable manners. He reviewed the documents carefully. Your inheritance includes the land, all structures, the livestock, and $312 in cash, he said. There are no debts against the property. James was quite insistent about that. He wanted you to start with a clean slate. Did you know him well? Eleanor asked. Well enough. He was a client for 6 years, and we played chess occasionally. He was a thoughtful man, Miss Brooks. He knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote this will. He wanted you to have a real chance, not just charity. Thornton slid the final document across the desk. Sign here, and the Circle T is legally yours. Eleanor's hand trembled as she signed her name. With a few strokes of the pen, she became a landowner. Independent for the first time in her life. Congratulations, Thornton said. James would be pleased. After the lawyer's office, Eleanor and Caleb went to the mercantile to order supplies. The store owner nodded approvingly when Eleanor introduced herself as the new owner of the Circle T. Heard about that? Good to see the place will not sit empty. He pulled out his order book. What do you need? Eleanor consulted her list. Fencing wire, nails, lumber for roof repairs, basic food supplies for a household of 4. She paused. Actually, I am not sure how many men I will be hiring yet. Make it supplies for 6 just to be safe. Come to about $40. Pay now or on account. $40. More than Eleanor had earned in wages during her entire time at Caleb's ranch. But she was a property owner now. Now, she said firmly, counting out bills. You did good in there, Caleb said as they left. Bought what you needed without hesitation. I spent $40 in 10 minutes. You bought what you needed without apology. That is being a business owner. Caleb untied his horse. Next step is finding those hands. Tom said he knows a couple of men who might be interested. Brothers named Jack and Samuel Porter. Good workers. Honest. Want me to reach out to them? Please, when can they start? I will ask them to come by tomorrow. Let you interview them yourself. It is your ranch. You should choose your own people. The Porter brothers arrived the next morning. Jack was the older one, perhaps 30, with careful eyes. Samuel was younger, maybe 25, with an easier smile. They stood in Caleb's yard, hats in hands, while Eleanor interviewed them. Tom says you are experienced with cattle, she began. Yes, ma'am, Jack said. Worked ranches in Wyoming and Colorado before coming here. Samuel and I know roundup, branding, calving, all of it. And you are looking for steady work? We are. Been doing day work since we got to Montana, but we would prefer something permanent. Eleanor asked them questions for 20 minutes, questions Caleb had helped her prepare, about their experience, their expectations, what they knew about the Circle T. They answered honestly and directly. The job pays $2 a week plus room and board, Eleanor said finally. Work is hard, days are long, and I am new at this, so I will be learning as I go. That means I will need your patience and your honesty when I am doing something wrong. Can you handle that? The brothers exchanged glances. We can, Jack said. Everyone is new at something once. Long as you are willing to learn and listen, we can work with that. Then you are hired. Eleanor felt satisfaction surge through her. Can you start tomorrow? Yes, ma'am. After they left, Eleanor turned to find Caleb watching from the porch. How did I do? Perfect. You asked the right questions, set clear expectations, and did not apologize for being new. Those are good men. You chose well. We chose well. I could not have done this without you. Maybe not at first, but you are learning fast. Caleb came down the steps. Eleanor, about yesterday? Do not. She held up a hand. Not yet. I need time to think, to figure out what I am doing with the ranch. Everything is happening so fast, and I am barely keeping up. I am not ready to think about anything else right now. Hurt flickered across Caleb's face, but he nodded. All right, take whatever time you need. I will still be here, helping however I can. No pressure, no expectations. Eleanor spent the next 2 days moving her belongings to the Circle T and preparing for the Porter brothers' arrival. Caleb helped her clean the bunkhouse, stock the pantry, make the place habitable. He worked alongside her without asking for acknowledgement or intimacy, just steady presence and practical assistance. On the third morning, Eleanor woke in her new home. The Porter brothers were in the bunkhouse. The cattle were in the pasture. The ranch was hers to run, to succeed or fail with entirely on her own merits. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. She made coffee on the stove that was now hers, watched the sun rise through windows that were now hers, planned the day's work on land that was now hers. But as she looked out across the prairie toward Caleb's ranch, barely visible in the distance, she could not ignore the ache in her chest. She had told him she was not ready. Both things were true. But she had also realized sometime in the dark hours that she cared about Caleb Wright more than she had admitted to herself, that his quiet strength had become essential to her sense of safety. She was not ready to tell him that. She needed to prove to herself first that she could succeed on her own. But someday, when the ranch was stable and she was confident in her own capabilities, she would tell him the truth. For now, though, there was work to do. Summer arrived with vengeance, turning the prairie gold and baking the earth hard as stone. Eleanor spent her days learning ranch work, early mornings checking cattle, midday repairs in brutal heat, evenings going over accounts by lamplight. The Porter brothers proved their worth daily, teaching her everything from how to read cattle for signs of illness to the best way to mend a fence. She was learning. She was surviving. But she was also exhausted in a way that went bone deep. 3 months passed. 3 months of relentless work, small victories, and frustrating setbacks. A section of fence collapsed in a storm and had to be rebuilt. 2 calves died despite her best efforts. The barn roof leaked worse than expected, requiring repairs that ate through her budget. But she had also successfully completed her first cattle sale, negotiated fair prices at the mercantile, and earned the grudging respect of neighboring ranchers. And through it all, Caleb had been there. Not hovering, not interfering, but present whenever she needed help. He would ride over every few days to check on joint fence lines or discuss water rights, but really to make sure she was managing. He never asked about his confession, never pushed for more than she was willing to give. He just remained steady and patient. Eleanor told herself she was grateful for the space. But late at night, alone in the house that still felt like it belonged to a dead man, she admitted the truth. She missed him. Not just his help, but his presence. The quiet conversations over coffee. The way he explained things without making her feel stupid. The rare smiles that transformed his serious face. She was in love with Caleb Wright, and the realization terrified her. It was mid-August when everything came to a head. Eleanor had ridden to town for supplies, leaving Jack and Samuel to handle repairs. The day was oppressively hot. She had just finished loading her wagon when she saw Caleb's horse tied outside the general store. Her heart jumped. She had not seen him in nearly 2 weeks, the longest stretch since she had arrived in Montana. He had been dealing with a sick horse that required constant care. Eleanor had made herself stay away, telling herself he needed space. But seeing his horse now made her realize how much she had been lying to herself about what she wanted. Eleanor walked toward the store. Through the window, she could see Caleb talking with Henderson. He looked tired, thinner than she remembered. She pushed open the door and Caleb turned. For a moment, their eyes met, and Eleanor saw everything she had been trying to ignore reflected back. Longing, hope, carefully controlled need. "Miss Brooks," he said formally. "Mr. Wright, how is the horse?" "Better. Touch and go for a while, but she is recovering." Henderson disappeared into the back room, leaving them alone. "I have missed you," Eleanor said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Caleb went very still. "Eleanor, no, let me finish." She stepped closer. "I told you I needed time, and I did. I needed to prove that I could manage the ranch, that I could be independent, that I was not just some desperate woman clinging to the first man who showed her kindness." She took a breath. "But I have proven that now. The ranch is stable. I am making it work. And I have realized that my independence does not mean I have to be alone." "What are you saying?" Caleb's voice was carefully controlled. "I am saying that you were right. You matter to me more than I wanted to admit." Eleanor's hands were shaking. "I am saying that when I think about my future, about building something lasting here, you are part of it. Not because I need rescuing, but because I want you there. Because everything is better when you are around." Henderson returned with grain. "Here you go, Caleb. Anything else?" "No, thank you." Caleb's eyes never left Eleanor's face. "Miss Brooks, could I speak with you outside?" They walked to where their horses were tied, far enough from the store that they would not be overheard. Eleanor's heart was racing. "Eleanor, I need you to be sure." Caleb's voice was rough. "I have spent 3 months respecting your boundaries, giving you space, telling myself to be patient. But if you are saying what I think you are saying, I need to know it is real. Not gratitude, not loneliness, not some misplaced sense of obligation because I helped you. It is not." Eleanor met his eyes directly. "It is real. It is terrifying and complicated and probably terrible timing, but it is real. I do not just need you, Caleb. I want you." There is a difference, something broke in his carefully controlled expression. "I have been in love with you since the day you sat in Martha Patterson's parlor and insisted on paying Doc Morrison even though you could not afford it. Since you faced down that bone setting without morphine and barely made a sound. Since you decided to fight instead of giving up, even when everything was stacked against you. You could have told me. No, I could not. You needed to find your own strength, build your own life. If I had pushed, if I had made demands, you would have always wondered if you stayed with me out of need rather than choice." Caleb stepped closer. "I wanted you to choose me from a position of strength, not desperation. I wanted you to be certain. I am certain." Eleanor reached up and touched his face. "I am absolutely terrified, but I am certain. I do not know what I am doing with romance any more than I knew what I was doing with ranching 3 months ago. But I learned the ranch, and I will learn this too. If you are willing to be patient with me." "Eleanor Brooks, I have been the definition of patient." He was smiling now, really smiling. "But are you sure? Because once I start courting you properly, I am not going to stop. You are going to get sick of me riding over every day." "I could never get sick of you." Eleanor rose on her toes and kissed him, quick and fierce and claiming, "Court me. Come over every day. Just do not disappear on me again." Caleb pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Never, I promise you that. Never again." They stood there in the dusty street, holding each other while curious townspeople tried not to stare. Eleanor did not care. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt like she had finally come home. Not to a place, but to a person. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Eleanor had experienced. Caleb courted her with quiet intensity and complete commitment. He rode over to the Circle T every evening after his own work was done, often staying late to help with whatever task Eleanor was struggling with. They would work side by side, then sit on her porch drinking coffee and talking until the stars came out. He taught her things he had learned through hard experience: how to judge the quality of breeding stock, how to read weather patterns, how to negotiate without backing down. She taught him things she had learned from her father: better bookkeeping methods, how to project income and plan for expenses. They were building something together. Not just a romance, but a partnership. Two ranches side by side, supporting each other, succeeding together. The Porter brothers noticed. Jack made no comment, but Samuel grinned whenever Caleb's horse appeared on the horizon. Sarah Mitchell stopped by one afternoon and found them working together on Eleanor's account books. "About time," Sarah said bluntly. "You two have been circling each other like nervous cattle for months. Glad you finally figured it out." Eleanor blushed, but Caleb just laughed. Some things are worth waiting for. By September, they had fallen into an easy rhythm. Caleb would arrive after breakfast, work alongside Eleanor and her hands until mid-afternoon, then return to his own ranch. Evenings he would come back for dinner. It was during one of these evenings that Caleb said, "I have been thinking." "Dangerous activity," Eleanor teased, but her heart was beating faster. "Our ranches border each other. We are already sharing resources: water rights, fence maintenance, equipment. We help each other during busy seasons. From a practical standpoint, it would make more sense to combine operations. Run them as one larger ranch instead of two smaller ones." Eleanor went very still. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I love you and I want to marry you. Not because it makes business, though it does. Not because you need protection or I need a housekeeper, but because I cannot imagine my future without you in it." Caleb took her hand. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build something lasting together. I want children with you if you want them. I want to grow old on this land with you by my side. Eleanor, will you marry me?" She thought about the journey that had brought her here: the broken arm, the dead fiancé, the desperate arrival. She thought about Caleb kneeling beside her, promising gentleness. She thought about 6 weeks of learning to survive, of building strength. She thought about the Circle T, about the independence she had fought so hard to achieve. Would marriage mean giving that up? But looking at this man who had supported her independence rather than trying to control it, she knew the answer. Yes. The word came out choked with tears. "Yes, I will marry you, but I have conditions." Caleb's smile was brilliant. "Name them." "The Circle T remains mine. Legally mine. I do not want to lose it by marriage. I want to keep it separate, my own property." "Agreed. I will have the lawyer draw up papers making it clear. And I want to be a real partner in running the combined operation. Not just the housekeeper and bookkeeper, but someone who makes decisions about the ranch and alongside you. Eleanor, I would not want it any other way. Your mind for business is better than mine. I would be a fool not to listen to you. And if we have children, I still want to work. I am not giving up ranching just because I am a mother. We will figure it out together." Caleb pulled her close. "Any other conditions?" "Just one." Eleanor looked up at him. "Promise me that if I ever become someone I do not recognize, someone who has lost herself in being your wife, you will tell me. Promise you will help me stay myself. I promise. Though I cannot imagine you ever being anything other than the stubborn, brilliant, fierce woman you are." He kissed her softly. "You saved yourself, Eleanor. I just had the privilege of watching. I am not about to let you lose that now." They were married in October, just before the first snows. The ceremony took place at the Circle T with half the territory in attendance. Sarah Mitchell stood up with Eleanor. Tom served as Caleb's best man. Even Martha Patterson made the trip from town, bringing a cake she had baked specially. It was not the wedding Eleanor had once imagined. There was no Boston church with stained glass windows, no society guests in expensive clothes, no orchestra. Instead, there was a simple ceremony performed by the circuit judge, vows exchanged on the porch of a ranch house, witnessed by neighbors who had become family. But as Eleanor stood beside Caleb, her hand in his, promising to build a life together, she realized this was better than anything she could have imagined. This was real. This was earned. This was hers. After the ceremony, they held a celebration that lasted well into the night. Someone produced a fiddle. Couples danced in the yard while children ran wild. Eleanor danced with Caleb, with Jack and Samuel, with Tom and Ezra, with every neighbor who had shown her kindness during those early, desperate months. When the last guest finally left, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching the land wake up. She felt Caleb's arms come around her from behind. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None." Eleanor leaned back against his chest. "Well, maybe one. I regret that James Thornton never got to see what his gift became. I wish I could thank him. I think he knows." Caleb rested his chin on her head. "I think wherever he is satisfied. He wanted someone who would love this land and work it and make it thrive. That is exactly what you are doing." "What we are doing," Eleanor corrected. "Come on, Mrs. Wright. We have got a ranch to run." Mrs. Wright. Eleanor tested the name and found it fit. She was not Eleanor Brooks anymore, desperate and alone. She was Eleanor Wright, partner and wife, building something larger than herself. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. They had to figure out logistics, whose ranch to make their primary residence. They chose the Circle T because the house was larger. What to do with Caleb's place? They kept it running with Tom and Ezra, using it for breeding while the Circle T focused on cattle production. They argued sometimes, usually about ranch business. Eleanor had strong opinions, and Caleb was used to making his own decisions. But they learned to fight fairly, to listen to each other's perspectives, to find compromises. And they learned that making up after a fight could be its own kind of pleasure. By spring, Eleanor was pregnant. The news terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She had never particularly imagined herself as a mother. But now, carrying Caleb's child, she found herself fiercely protective of this new life. "What if I am terrible at it?" she asked Caleb one night. "What if I am too independent, too focused on the ranch? What if I cannot balance everything? Then we will figure it out together, same as everything else." Caleb kissed her temple. "You are going to be an amazing mother, Eleanor, strong and smart and fair. You will teach our children to stand on their own 2 feet, to work hard, to never give up. What more could they need?" The baby, a girl they named Sarah Rose after Sarah Mitchell and Eleanor's mother, arrived in December during a blizzard. Eleanor labored with only Caleb and Sarah Mitchell in attendance. Doc Morrison trapped in town by impassable roads. It was terrifying and painful and the hardest thing Eleanor had ever done. But when she finally held her daughter, wrinkled and red-faced and perfect, she understood love at first sight. "She is perfect," Caleb whispered, his finger stroking the baby's tiny hand. "She is absolutely perfect." Eleanor looked at her husband holding their daughter with such tenderness and wondered how she had gotten so lucky. She had come to Montana broken and desperate, expecting nothing but survival. Instead, she had found purpose, community, love, and now this. New life, new hope, new possibilities. The years that followed brought more children. 2 sons, James and Thomas, named for the men who had shaped Eleanor's journey. They brought prosperity as the combined ranches grew and thrived. They brought hard times too. Drought years when they had to make difficult decisions. Illness that swept through cattle. Injuries that reminded them how dangerous ranch life could be. But through everything, Eleanor and Caleb remained partners. They made decisions together, supported each other through setbacks, celebrated victories as a team. The Circle T and the Double W became known throughout the territory as well-run, prosperous operations. More than that, they became symbols of what was possible when people worked together. Eleanor never forgot where she had come from or how close she had come to losing everything. On the anniversary of her arrival in Montana, she would stand on her porch and remember. She remembered stepping off that stagecoach with a broken arm and shattered dreams. She remembered the pain of having her bones set and Caleb's steady voice promising gentleness. She remembered 6 weeks of learning to survive, of discovering strength she did not know she had. She remembered the letter that gave her choices, the terrifying decision to claim her inheritance, the slow realization that she was falling in love. All of it had led here, to this life she had built through grit and determination and the willingness to accept help when it was offered. 20 years after that stagecoach arrival, Eleanor Wright stood on the porch of the Circle T and watched her 3 children working alongside their father in the corral. Sarah, 17 now, and every bit as stubborn as her mother, was breaking a young horse with skill that made Eleanor proud. James and Thomas, 15 and 12, were helping Caleb repair a section of fence. This was what she had built. Not just a ranch, not just a marriage, but a legacy. A family that would carry on long after she was gone, working this land she had claimed through nothing but courage and determination. Thinking deep thoughts? Sarah Mitchell, still healthy and sharp at 60, had ridden over for coffee. Just remembering, Eleanor said, thinking about how different my life could have been if James Thornton had not died, or if Caleb had not been kind, or if I had been too proud to accept help. But none of that happened. You are here, and you have built something remarkable. Sarah sipped her coffee. You know what I think? I think it all happened exactly as it was meant to. James gave you the opportunity. Caleb gave you support. But you did the actual work of building this life. You and your courage. Eleanor thought about that. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe all the pieces had come together exactly as they needed to. The broken arm that had forced her to accept help. The dead fiancé who had left her a future she had to fight for. The cowboy who had seen her strength when she could only see her weakness. Caleb emerged from the barn and caught sight of her on the porch. Even after 20 years, Eleanor's heart still skipped when he smiled at her. He crossed the yard and climbed the porch steps, dropping a kiss on her head. The south fence is finished. Jack and Samuel are taking the herd to the upper pasture tomorrow, and Sarah Rose convinced another horse to trust her. That girl has a gift. She gets it from you, Eleanor said. Patient and gentle, and willing to wait for trust to be earned. Maybe. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders. Or maybe she gets it from her mother, who showed up here broken and afraid but refused to stay that way. Eleanor looked out at her land, her family, her life. She felt a contentment so deep it was almost physical. She had traveled across a continent to marry a stranger, arrived to find him dead, broken her arm, and nearly lost everything. But through pain and fear and impossible choices, she had found something better than she had ever dreamed. She had found herself. She had found love. She had found home. And it had all started with a cowboy who promised gentleness and kept that promise. Not just in setting her bone, but in every day that followed. Who had helped her heal, not just physically, but in all the ways a person could be broken. Who had loved her enough to let her stand on her own 2 feet before asking her to stand beside him. I love you, Eleanor said quietly. Thank you for being patient with me. Always. Caleb kissed her temple. You were worth waiting for. You were worth everything. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Eleanor Wright stood on the porch of the ranch she had inherited, claimed, and made her own. Surrounded by the family she had built and the man who had helped her become who she was meant to be. She had stepped off that stagecoach with a broken arm and no future. She had arrived at the end of everything, but in the kindness of a stranger, the gift of a dead man, and her own fierce determination, she had found not an ending, but a beginning. And what a beautiful beginning it had been.